Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Dexter Thierry and I'm the lead analyst for technology and telecoms at EIU, which is part of the Economics Group. And I will be moderating today's session, Digital Transformation at Work, how it started, how it's going. Digital transformation has become a major issue for many sectors and companies, and they all want to use technology to make sure they remain relevant in their respective markets. And while we all want to forget about COVID, it is clear that it has acted as a major accelerator in terms of digital transformation. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said that he saw 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months at the start of the pandemic, and he continues to remain very bullish, predicting that tech spending as a percentage of GDP will continue to increase over the rest of the decade. In the long term, it's pretty clear we won't turn the clocks back, and digital transformation here is here to stay. Every company will eventually have to become a tech company if it wants to survive. But in the shorter term, implementing that vision remains difficult because there is a lot of complexity involved. And this is why we put together this panel to understand the early lessons of that journey. As such, I'm delighted to introduce our 4 speakers who will join me today. With us, we have Cassie Kay, who is Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Principal Financial Group. Gavin Felder, Chief Strategy Officer at Yum Brands. Laurie Rodriguez, Chief Digital Officer at Women in Tech. And Rachel Peterson, Vice President of Marketing at Fountain. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Let's have a first question, and I'll direct it first to Cassie about COVID, because it obviously has had a major impact in the last couple of years. So I think what will be interesting for our audience to know is example of concrete change you've seen in the last couple of years, probably looking at what you've done well and what you could have done better or differently.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we noticed with our customers. One was adoption, a willingness to engage with us differently. Historically, we did a lot of human in-person interactions, and during COVID, we couldn't do that. So we quickly had to pivot to have, technology that would enable a digital interaction. We had been on a journey already at Principal for making a lot of digital investments. So going 100% remote went really well for us. Our biggest probably planning that we had to do was just getting some of the bigger screens to our employees, but all their computers, connectivity went really well. I would say one of the things that I feel we did really well during this time too was as we started to see a much bigger adoption where we needed to move much more quickly, moving some of our assets and workloads to cloud much more quickly than we had been anticipating. We spent a lot of investment in upskilling, giving opportunities for our employees to upskill. The adoption has been incredible. We have well over 50% of our employees have taken different cloud training, which has really helped advance the speed at which we could develop new, if you will. From a perspective of where we could have improved, I would say early on, as we were trying to serve our customers differently, each of our areas was trying to solve that problem themselves, right? And so when we learned that everybody was struggling, we got to solutions that could really be adopted across the company more effectively. But overall, we're really happy with how we supported our customers, continue to support our customers, even now in a more hybrid world.
Yeah, so it seems from your perspective that you already started part of that journey pre-COVID, but obviously COVID added kind of an element to it.
Accelerated.
Gavin, what has been your experience at Yum Brands in terms of the impact of COVID on digital transformation?
Yeah, quite similar story for us, Dexter. It also starts several years back and, well before the world was impacted by COVID, where we'd been investing in our digital capabilities for some time. And in fact, a lot of that came to a head in early 2019 when we made the decision to form a central dedicated digital and technology team at a portfolio level that sits above the 4 brands that we have. And the goal there was to build an ecosystem of technologies that we could scale around the world. So a lot of that structural work was already underway. We had some specific tactical work that was in play around how we think about off-premise in our category and digitally enabled business. But everything that happened in the early part of 2020 really just forced us to go so much faster. That was the real tangible change that we experienced. It was the change in mindsets where we realized that we got to make decisions quickly. And with that, we had to have a higher risk tolerance if they went wrong, because in our category, our consumer had shifted. And if we didn't shift at the same pace, then we just wouldn't be relevant to them anymore. So an example of that would be with so many people locked down in early 2020 and a lot of our dining rooms were closed, we had what I'd call a mismatch between supply and demand in our restaurants. We had lots of customers wanting and needing our food, but we didn't have all the access points to get that food to them. So we realized that for our Pizza Hut business specifically, we had to find a way to give customers who wanted carry out an option to collect their orders without coming into the restaurant, something we hadn't really done before. So we introduced what we called contactless curbside, where you could wait in your car, have somebody bring your pizza out to you and put it in the trunk of your car. Now, in normal circumstances, we would have taken several months to roll that out. We would have started at one store, then gone to 5 stores, then 10 stores, and gone through this iterative process of operational pressure testing. But we had to just roll it out. We rolled it out in weeks, and it certainly wasn't perfect, but we knew we had to move with pace. And I think that's really the mentality and the mindset that we need to continue now, is moving fast and really prioritizing action over perfection in our minds.
Yeah, so pace. I think
Yes.
COVID has done that. Laurie, has it been the same for you?
So I started COVID when I was working at Gartner, and we had to flip to help not only ourselves and our employees, but also our clients make those transitions very quickly. And it was bifurcated, right? So you had crisis industries like hospitality on one hand, and then you had others who were really, think of Zoom and Netflix that were growing rapidly, very different problems. So we pulled together, tiger teams and figured out how we can deliver more remotely from a client perspective, similar to what Kathy was saying, but also how our employees could, take advantage of being mostly remote, which we had started that journey again, just like Gavin beforehand, moving in those directions, and then had to accelerate quickly. During that time, then I moved to Women in Tech, which was interesting because they were born digital. They were intentionally cloud and remote only. So it was very interesting to see, being in a legacy organization and how they handled the pandemic and the acceleration, both internally and externally for our clients, helping those make those hard pivots to an organization that was already set up in those various ways. The one thing for Women in Tech, though, that was difficult was we were very dependent on hosting physical events. So getting people together physically was really a key part of our value proposition. Clearly, we had to switch on a dime like everybody else to make those virtual. So we really looked at how can we continue, because we were a young organization, how can we continue this rapid period of growth while transitioning to a different model of delivery. And so I think, we didn't get everything right. We made some early platform decisions that didn't go well. And one thing that we think that we did really well was that we had open conversations early and often on what wasn't working. And then we had to make those hard decisions to let go and move on quickly, right? So just say, like I said, these platforms, we said this isn't going to work for the changing needs of our membership and our volunteers. And so we had to just, cut our losses and move on.
Yeah. So again, I would faster, I would quickly. I think COVID has really kind of accelerated that transition. Has it been the same for you, Rachel? Judge much more quickly at things happening in your perspective as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually share a similar experience to Laurie in that I transitioned organizations in the midst of COVID from an organization that had been established for several decades to one that had, again, been born during the digital era. And one of the key strengths, but also weaknesses that I found really across organizations is communication. So there was the immediate need to switch to asynchronous communication, right? The mass embrace of Zoom, the mass embrace of Slack, Microsoft Teams, all of those communication applications. And on the one hand, I think that's something that we did very well at fountain in terms of making sure that everyone was clued in. We are a remote first organization, which was not the case prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic taught us that we can actually thrive in that way. But simultaneously, as is always the case, right, too much of a good thing turns out to not be such a good thing. So I think where we're working on the flip side is now that we have achieved really that accelerated embrace of different types of communications, how do we ensure that that communication is actually effective, right? We're not just talking at one another, we are speaking to one another. And that's something that I have seen as a trend really across organizations, and especially talking with other folks in the marketing realm as I am. Everyone wants to be in constant communication with one another, right? That's the natural desire when you're not together in person. But how can you harness that desire to communicate and turn it into something that is effective so that you don't just have folks who are, on Slack all day or on Zoom all day because they feel they need to be versus when they actually should be to have really effective, efficient communication?
Yes, I think we're still at an early stage, so efficiency is, I guess, doing it in the best possible way is still not quite there yet, and we're learning. We're learning as we go along because we're still very, very early in the transition. I kind of want to move on in terms of, what is digital transformation about, and maybe start with Laurie, because you moved to an organization which you call as being born digital or digital native. So if digital transformation is about getting insights on data, understanding data, what importance are the different technology that we're seeing? Is it, AI, cloud, we've heard that, IoT, many, many other things. Is it one technology specifically, or is it just integration in the combination of those technologies put together towards like a very specific outcome? What has been your experience there?
So again, going back to my time in Gartner, I was in this very unique position. I was the business working to build products for C-suite technology leaders. So the IT departments were my customers. And at the same time, I was working with our technology teams to build the technology stack. So it was this very 360 view. But as the business, I was always business first. So what are the ambitions of the organization? What business are we in? And what needs are we solving for our clients and our customers? So I take a different look to the technology stack. We always look at technology as the shiny object. For me, it's always, what am I trying to drive? And how can technology enable the change in behaviors to get our employees, our customers, anyone on that ecosystem moving down that path to helping us meet those business objectives. So I think to answer your question, it's really the combination of technologies that enable the business objectives. That could be a single technology, and most likely it's not a single technology. It's more likely an entire interoperable. This is really important. It has to be seamlessly integrated across everything that your customers and your employees are touching. And the second piece, and this is, unless you're actually the person who digs into the data, you have no idea how bad your data is, because simple things like enterprise size or who is a customer. You may have your customer in there 3 times because they have 3 different emails. So having some standardization along what your data says is really important. Otherwise, your analysis and your decision making are thrown off. So I think one of the biggest reasons why 70% of digital initiatives fail, I mean, that number is astonishing, is that we get so caught up in the technology itself and we lose sight of the business drivers. Sometimes those drivers aren't clear from the start, or everyone wasn't on board in a line. They may be nodding their head, but in the background, they're putting up blockers because they don't believe in it. Or something in the market shifted, but we were so invested in that technology, or we were so invested in that initiative that maybe we put forward that we're not willing to stay the course. That's why I said earlier, one thing I was really impressed with women in tech was that we had made some early technology decisions, realized that our market and our needs had shifted, and we had to let them go and move on very quickly. So, I know I didn't answer your question in the way that you wanted, like a single technology, but I want to keep driving the point that it's really about technology enabling the business objective, not the business objective coming on top of the technology stack or the single technology that your CEO might be enamored with because he had went playing golf with somebody and heard about this buzzy new thing and brought it back to the company.
Yes, and I mean, you're right. I saw when you said that we were too focused on the specific technology, all your fellow panelists were just nodding in agreement. And I think that's right. That's why we're seeing more and more kind of integrated offers for whoever type of company is trying to put different things together. Also, so you can see when Rory was mentioning in terms of you don't know how good or bad your data is until you actually look at it. You had kind of a smile looking into that. Is it something you also experienced when you started looking specifically at digital transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start by saying, like the two other ladies, I joined Principal in the middle of the pandemic as well. And Principal had already started a journey of making a lot of different technology investments, not for technology's sake. Like Lori said, we have a strategy that is centered around our customers. And so when you listen to your customers and you understand the problems that they have and the needs that they have, you have to serve them differently. And so while Principal has been very successful for 143 years, there was a recognition that some of the things that we had been doing historically are no longer the way that our customers want to be served. And so because of that, we had to make a number of investments and continue to make investments to solve the problems that they have and to serve them more effectively. One of them is around the data. A customer expects us to know who they are, expects us to know the business that they do with us, even though we have several different, lines of products. They expect us to know that about them. And if the data isn't good, like Lori said, you can't serve them in that way. And so we have been making a lot of investments in mastering our data so that we know exactly who our customers are, investing in a customer data platform so that we know a lot of the interactions that our customers are having so that across the company, we can serve them more holistically. I'm with Lori that it's not about the technology. A really good designer once told me, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And when you're focused on the problem and truly understanding the needs, and how you have to solve that problem, that's where the technology comes in. But trying to get enamored with a technology and then push it on, your internal clients, employees, or our customers, it doesn't work. So that's what I would say. And again, I'm really proud of the customer-centric strategy that we have.
And obviously, Rachel, with your marketing perspective, the use of data is very important, and knowing what data you have on, internally or externally is also critical for your role and for your company as well.
Yes, absolutely. And, one thing that Kathy mentioned, and Lori as well, that really rings true is you need to have an understanding of what questions you are looking to answer, or else all of the technology, all of the data, even if it is good data, and the insights derived from that won't be able to assist you. And, one of the big beliefs that I have is that, understanding data, understanding those insights, that's not a destination, that's a continuously moving journey. And so I think, especially from the marketing perspective, we always have to start out with what are the questions that we need to answer, right? What is that business problem? What is that issue that our customers are having that we have to answer? And you really need that lens when you're going to start digging into foundational data so that you understand what you're looking for and the purpose that you need it to serve. And I think that same statement can be extrapolated out really for all of the transformational technologies that are supposed to make our lives and our businesses so much better, right? If you don't come into it with an understanding of your purpose and what you're trying to achieve through that technology, the level of adoption doesn't matter because your business, your customers, folks need to understand the purpose behind that technology and the purpose behind that adoption.
Absolutely. No purpose, no point of using technology in a sense, because you're just having a nice shiny toy, but it doesn't do anything very useful. Gavin, what has been your perspective from your side for your company as well?
I completely agree with what's been said. I think you have to have a clear perspective of what you're trying to solve for. and then select the right technologies to deliver that vision. And so maybe what I can offer is maybe one click down from that in terms of our specific business, because the way we think about our technology choices is through the lens of how we can make things easier for our customers and our teams. It's a very, very simple framework that we use, but it also drives our decision making in terms of what we do and, importantly, what we don't do as well. And that's really the insight that we've got from COVID, which is, once somebody finds an easier way to do things, either at a customer level or at a team member level, it's almost impossible to make them take a more difficult way back. And so for us, it's about how do we use technologies to unlock new levels of ease. And so for our business, we have restaurants around the world. We want to make things easier, whether you're in a Taco Bell drive-through ordering food, or whether you're counting inventory at the end of a shift at a KFC. All of the technologies that we're embracing, that we're building or we're buying, are there to unlock new levels of ease so that journey, either if you're a team member or if you're a customer, ends up being a lot easier. So that's really the frame of reference that we have, and then allows us to decide, okay, this technology works, this doesn't. And so a recent example in our business is a technology product that we developed internally to help our restaurant managers. It's essentially a mobile app that our managers can use, where all of the tools that they have that they need to run a restaurant are loaded on there for them to use, from labor deployment to their daily food safety routines to inventory ordering. And all of this was developed because we're trying to answer the question, what's going to make life easier for the manager to run that restaurant? So very similar thinking, but hopefully one dimension through how we think about it in our business.
And that is a very interesting tool and almost a perfect segue to the next section I wanted to discuss, which was about, obviously you can have digital transformation for internal processes, as you mentioned with your example right now, Gavin. You can have digital transformation in terms of external processes, client facing, making it easier for the client. Is that kind of a big overlap between the two? Do they require, I guess, different elements, or do you do something more internally that you would do externally, and vice versa? What would be your perspective? Because obviously, Gavin, you talked internally, but there's been things you've done, I'm sure, externally that you can also highlight in terms of application of new technology you've developed recently.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you have to do both. You really have to solve for both. And what can truly unlock the deepest benefits is if they're both tied to a similar strategy or way of thinking. And so again, for us, we have a consumer insights lab, and all the work that they did over the last couple of years has pointed back to this idea of ease. How do we just make things easier, right? How does technology enable ease? How does that translate into a better customer experience and a better team member experience for the people who work for us and our franchisees? And so again, that just informs how you think about your technology choices for internal application and external application. So I think, different solutions and different roadmaps, but if they can all point back to the primary objective that you're trying to solve for, I think it makes your decision making a lot easier overall.
Yes. Rachel, what's your perspective in terms of that, in terms of internal, the external, and the overlapping potential example in terms of what you've developed recently at Fountain?
Yeah, certainly. So I think one certainly feeds the other. So the ability to streamline internal processes is, in the majority of cases, going to allow you to put out better products at a faster pace, likely, that are more aligned with what your customers need. And then vice versa, at Fountain, we're a platform for high volume hourly hiring, and we learn a lot from the feedback loop with our customers and creating ways to communicate with them to understand, how is the platform working for them, right? How are their applicants coming into the system? What are we seeing? And that has allowed us to really keep a finer pulse on what customers need in order to increase those efficiencies, right? So the increased efficiencies of the internal processes feed into those increased efficiencies for our customers. So for example, being a mobile first hiring platform, because we understand that about 80% of hourly workers are going to be applying for a job on their phone. And so we need to meet them where they are. And that in turn allows us to better serve our customers, because our customers, when they're going out there, they're trying to hire thousands of hourly workers at a time. They can trust, okay, these applicants are going to have the most efficient process possible. But without a feedback loop and without the right types of technologies and applications to encourage that loop, we would probably be sitting on a well of untapped and untouched insights.
Laurie, what has been your perspective on that and your experience as well?
I love what Rachel and Gavin have said already. I'm just so happy to hear it, actually, because prior to the pandemic and even going back a few years before that, we weren't talking in those terms. We certainly weren't talking about employee experiences. So we've made leaps and bounds, and I want to recognize the progress organizations have made. Happy. So I think I'm going to add something a little more provocative and future thinking to the conversations, because I think what's been said is wonderful for today. When we think of Web3 and the future of work, we're moving into a period where the line between customer, supplier, and employer is actually blurring. Back before the 90s, it might have been, hard and fast what an employee was versus a customer, but it's becoming more like a continuum or a matrix with levels of access and value for an employee versus a customer versus a vendor, a partner, or even a node, an IoT node. When we think of blockchain, we're even seeing the distribution of ownership from organizations and platforms to individuals and creators. So we're starting to see new business models emerging where the line between the customer and the enterprise might not even exist. Take a DAO, a distributed autonomous organization, for example. It's a bottom-up entity, right, with no central authority. That's mind-blowing when you think about it. So if you aren't thinking the way that Gavin and Rachel have said, where it starts with the customer and the eternal, and there's this notion of both of these things coming together to meet the company objectives, you're really far behind at this point. And your technology and your digital strategy needs to really, leapfrog where you are today, because these new types of business models and organizations are coming on really quickly. And some of it you can already see in traditional organizations with things like user-generated content. Go talk to your digital marketing team about that. You're using users to be creators for your brand. That's already happening, and that's going to expand. In Women in Tech, we're almost 100% volunteers. So our members and our volunteers, who are our employees, are one and the same. So we're kind of moving into that model already, and it's fascinating to me. And one of the reasons I went with this organization, I'm really interested in this notion of co-value creation and what the new version of an enterprise is going to mean in the future.
Yes, I mean, that's a very forward-looking perspective, very, very interesting. We'll see whether or not Web3 becomes what these proponents think it would be in the future. I still have some issue about the centralization versus decentralization type of thing, but we'll see whether we get there or not. Cassie, going back to the internal versus external, Cassie, what has been your experience in principle? Have you seen kind of the same trend that your fellow panelists have highlighted as well?
Yes, absolutely. Totally aligned with what has been said already. One of the things that we've talked about, again, when you think about customers wanting this simple, frictionless, easy to do business with experience, this concept of back office and front office kind of blurs now, right? You can't, even if you can't automate processes in the back office, if you will, if they don't align to the experience that the customer expects, right? So I always say you can have a really simple experience, a nice front end, but if your processes behind the scenes are complex, even if they're automated, a customer will see that complexity. You can't hide it, right? And so this idea of not addressing both internal processes as well as, having really simple interactions developed with the customer in the way that they want, you'll have issues, you'll have conflicts, and the customer will be the one who suffers from an experience perspective. So I absolutely agree. Along the lines of what Lori said, I will say our customers can be different types of customers, all in the same person, if you will. So we can have a customer, as an example, who is a 401k plan participant. They can be an SMB business owner, and they could be an individual investor. all of those require a different experience and expectation from the customer. So this idea of being able to serve them differently, being able to leverage technologies that will enable that along the lines of where Lori was heading. We have a lot of conversations about that internally because it's something, again, our customers are expecting of us in terms of how they work with us and how we serve them.
Yes. I think what I get from the four of you is basically the lines are being blurred more and more between internal and external. I think there's far less of a differentiation through technology, through digital transformation happening here. I want to move to the next section and kind of coming back to what you said a bit earlier, Cassie, in terms of I think about 50% of our employees have been undergone cloud training in the last couple of years. And to talk about the human element. So we talk a lot about technology, the technical aspect of things, but we're still working, we're still there, we're still not quite to the robots are taking over and doing all our jobs. So I guess I want to ask a question in terms of the importance of the employee, the human, or the client as well in terms of digital transformation. But perhaps more importantly, is the lack of skills, the lack of experience, the lack of knowledge becoming a major issue in terms of future digital transformation or even kind of ongoing digital transformation? So maybe Cassie, if you have a perspective on that.
Yes. So one of the things as we have been looking at the investments we're making, where we're heading, when you look at our strategy and the sort of technology roadmaps, if you will, that are going to enable the capabilities that we need, we recognize that if we look at the current skills of our organization, we have a gap. When you look at what was going on during the last couple of years with talent and the Great Resignation and employees wanting to have a different opportunity or experience, we knew we had to double down on making training or experiences available to help them develop new skills. This idea of being able to just hire all this new capability, or skill sets. You can't find you can't find them fast enough, but also our employees have this huge wealth of knowledge about our customers and our company and part of our culture. So we knew we needed to invest. And so when you double down on certain types of technologies, you can have the conversations with employees to say, here's where we're going. Here's the things that aren't going to be around for much longer, but here's some opportunities you have. You can pick the types of technologies you want to be a part of in the future. We'll help you move to that. We'll give you opportunities. So we did not mandate, a number of hours of training. We just left it to our employees and our leaders to figure out. And like I said, the adoption has been every metric we had has been exceeded. But the other thing that it has also done is built an excitement within the company across the tech community and even some of people in the business. When you think about citizen development, there's so many new capabilities that they can leverage, different types of technology and different ways to solve the problem, how they work, how they share things that they've built, and then how they work together differently. It's certainly broken down walls across the globe for us. And it's just, like I said, built an excitement where teams are solving problems in ways they've never had. And that was something we hadn't even anticipated. So for us, I would say it has been a huge success. We'll continue to invest. And again, it's another way of listening to the problems our employees have and offering solutions that will benefit them.
Yeah, so basically people are naturally interested in learning new things. I think that's something quite obvious. Gavin, has it been the same for you at Yum in terms of putting new technologies? Are you seeing the same thing? I guess the same issues in terms of finding the right people to do that type of role.
Yeah, I mean, Dexter, maybe I can talk a little bit about a myth that's out there in our industry, which is that all restaurants are going to be staffed and run by robots and machines. We've heard that a lot, and there's a lot of innovation that's going on in that space. Look, we don't think that's the case. We always believe that there'll be a hugely important role for people to play in our business. And our job is to create a culture and a career path to make sure that we attract the best talent in the industry. And a lot of that starts with telling the stories of the people who started in our restaurants that are now in executive teams, and having clear career paths for the people that are just joining our business. But having said that, we think there is room for the coexistence of real technology that interacts with humans in our restaurants, but doing that in a very smart and a very contained way. And the whole idea goes back to something I said earlier, which is what's going to help make somebody's job easier. Is there something that we can take away from their current tasks? They can spend more time with customers, or they can spend more time on the food. And that's really the way we're thinking about it. So if there's a way to take away some of the more manual, labor-intensive tasks, some of the more back office or back of house things that a person has to do in our restaurants, that would be a real value add. And I think they would appreciate that as well, because it just makes the team experience so much better. Maybe one way to think about it is what you see with airlines. In the past, a gate agent would have to do all the work in terms of checking your bags and weighing things and, checking you in, and then, you would have to do the rest. Now they started introducing kiosks 5-10 years ago where you could tag your own bags, and, the check-in agent would just do some of the basic documentation checks. That's just an interesting way of bringing technology to coexist alongside human beings, but now that human beings' job is a lot easier and a lot better to enjoy. So that's kind of the way we think about it. I'm not sure it entirely answered your question, but that's kind of the way we think about the human element when it comes to the intersection of technology kind of on the ground for us.
Yeah, I like your use of the term coexisting. I think that's something sometimes we forget when you talk about technology. We think technology as replacement, but it's far more about coexistence and collaboration. And I'm also happy to hear that next time I go to one of your restaurants, we'll still have humans available there. Cassie, yes, you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add something that along the lines of what Gavin said on customers. So we are finding the exact same thing. There's this thought originally as we started building digital solutions that everybody's going to want this end-to-end totally digital solution. What we're finding is that not to be the case at all. In fact, and it's not gender defined, it's not age, it's based on the decision that a customer is making, how important it is, how complex, how big of a decision it is. We are finding they will go so far in a digital process, but then they'll want to talk with somebody. And so making those seamless interactions, the ability to go to talk to somebody and then go back to the digital process, making that easy to do. So this interaction between technology and humans is exactly what we're hearing from our customers as well.
Customers want the choice. Sometimes they want to talk to a human, sometimes they want to talk to a machine, and sometimes they're not really sure. Laurie, from your perspective at Women in Tech, do you see kind of maybe the shortage in terms of skills and the shortage in terms of people with the right skill as a major issue going forward, or do you think maybe those fears are a bit overblown?
Yeah, I mean, part of what the mission of Women in Tech is to get more women to transition into technology, embrace technology, and then make careers in the technology space. I'm so encouraged and energized by what I'm hearing so far about how the people on this panel and their organizations are looking at upskilling and their people. It wasn't very long ago, I was driving to drop one of my many kids off to college and listening to a business book where, the woman was talking about how they hire capabilities, right? It was hiring the capabilities, not skilling the people they already have. And then you let them go when you're done with them. So I think part of the reason we're here where we are with the talent shortage is that we bought into that. We bought into, you don't need to invest in training. That's overhead. You can cut that out. It's one of the first things to go. And maybe I'd have to look, but there's probably a correlation, maybe even a causation with the financial crisis. And the last time we cut everything, let those go. And then we live that. And so now some organizations still have this mindset that we have all this talent and we have this talent gap, right? So we have all these people that don't have the skills we need, but we have all these open positions and we don't have talent to fill them. And I really like where you're talking about giving the talent you already have the opportunity to learn where they want to learn, aligned to their aspirations in their career and where they are in their personal life, and move forward and skill and stay within that organization. That I think is a much, first of all, it creates, you avoid that quiet quitting, right? We haven't really talked about that. We're now moving into that quiet quitting phase. If your people are quiet quitting, that's not on them. That's on you. You're not giving them the opportunities to feel fulfilled. You're not acknowledging the value that they bring to the organization, and you're not challenging them to stretch themselves, aligned to their ambitions. So, again, from my perspective, I'm talking to a lot of women who find themselves in that old model, and it's much. Unfortunately, this is especially true for women, people of color, and immigrants. We have biases and assumptions that get in the way of their success, which gets in the way of our success. So if we can challenge some of those biases and assumptions and do more of what this panel is talking about, we actually probably can solve some of this talent shortage that we have with the people that we have, and or open up new possibilities for bringing different types of people into our organizations.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Rachel, what is your perspective on that in terms of IT shortages or kind of the role of the human element in terms of digital transformation?
Absolutely. So I think, to Lori's point, it's not necessarily the talent shortage that we might hear a lot about. It's not necessarily going back to the buzzwords that are all over the place in the professional world right now. But I think the key piece of digital transformation really starts with organizational and cross-functional buy-in at the employee level. So where we've seen the greatest success is when we start an initiative at sort of that level one, helping everyone involved understand how this is going to help them. And I think that's one of the key pitfalls that a lot of businesses fall into, right? A group of executives might get very excited about this new technology or this new opportunity or a digital transformation plan. And they're excited about it, but they don't necessarily think about how do we want to cascade this message out to the entire organization? How can we be clear in the ways we're communicating this so that every single person understands, oh, there's a benefit to me in this, and that's going to help motivate them for whatever additional knowledge, trainings, anything else that needs to happen beyond that to help support that transformation. But I think the buy-in at that foundational stage is where a lot gets lost. And that's where we then tend to see over time, oh, certain employees seem less engaged than others. They don't seem as though they're along with us for the ride. But, that issue, kind of going back to what Lori said, it rarely has anything to do with that employee themselves. It's likely that there has been a failure somewhere else along the pipeline in expressing how this is going to benefit the organization, how this is going to benefit and empower the employee and provide them with new opportunities and learnings. So I think that foundational buy-in is the key piece of the human element that often gets overlooked, because naturally when you're talking about transformation initiatives, there's a lot of excitement, and that can sometimes lead to gaps in communication that cause longer term issues.
Yes, I think you're right. You need to have everybody on board to make sure that your project, whatever you want to do, whatever you're trying to achieve as a company, as an organization, is on the same board, because otherwise anybody who isn't is going to be a break on that transformation or that attempt at transformation. I'm afraid we ran out of time. It's been a fascinating conversation. At least I thought so. I hope our panelists thought so, and I hope our audience has thought so as well. Maybe a few key takeaways from me before we completely finish up. So COVID has been a clear accelerator, and we've heard quite a lot talking about pace, fast. So the acceleration, doing things much more quickly. In terms of digital transformation, it's really not about the tech, but understanding the need, knowing why you want to use the technology, making things easier. We're seeing an increased blurring of lines between internal use cases and external use cases. And obviously, the human is still at the center, and the organization is still at the center. People are actually interested in learning new things. It's about the coexistence, and it's also about, from the customer point of view, having the choice between one day using a chatbot, and another day talking to a real person. I want to thank our panelists today, Cassie Kay, Kevin Felder, Laurie Rodriguez, and Rachel Peterson. And I want to thank everyone for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.